what is the vibe, how does everything look, it definitely influences, and it gives me some kind of an understanding of how I can start the music. So it was incredibly helpful. I already had a little bit of more of an idea of what I was going to do. But then again, it's also like always such a different process, because when I was going through this film with Night, and as we were starting out, because Josh Hartnett, he's kind of funny as the butcher. So this is a thriller. So like as I was like watching the scenes, I was like, damn, like this. I wasn't sure, like, is this a comedy? Is this a dark comedy? Like, where are we going, and what story is the music gonna tell? So it took us a few weeks just to kind of figure out what would be the role of the music in the storytelling.
How does it feel to be part of an M. Night Shyamalan experience?
It's definitely an interesting ride to work with M. Night.
How
It's
did
a
that how did that start? How did that happen? Can you share that story with us?
yeah. So originally, like, I did his last film too, which was called Knock at the Cabin, and that
Okay.
was so how that happened is, yeah, it was kind of surprising, because Sue Jacobs, who is the music supervisor on this film and the last one as well, she had shared with him some of my music. I think particularly something from a TV series I did called Why the Last Man.
Hmm.
And I had no knowledge of this happening. And then I get a phone call like a few weeks later, and my agent just says, M. Night wants to talk with you on the phone. Like, are you available now? And I'm like, what? So he had heard that music and it had inspired him. And while he was, I guess, writing the storyboard for Knock at the Cabin, he was listening to the music. So he called me and said, let's try this out. And if it doesn't work out, no hard feelings. Let's see what happens. And it worked out very well. So here I am finishing the second film in a couple of years.
That's amazing. That's really cool. Um, what did you read the script of Trap, or did you see the finished film before
I
you?
read the script. First thing I did that was I read the script, and how I work with Night is like immediately after I read the script, I always start writing music. So kind of start exploring just based on the script, and I will write a suite, maybe like 20 minutes of music. And as I'd done that, I shared with him, and then I also this time went on the set. So I flew to Toronto where they were filming, and I was there for a couple of days, just kind of feeling the vibe. So I'd already started thinking quite a bit about the music, and I was already writing before I got the first cut.
The interesting thing about Toronto is it's twofold. One, I'm from Toronto.
Nice.
Uh, Number two, there's a scene. I'm not going to reveal the context of the scene, but there's a shot, actually, I shouldn't say a scene. There's a shot of a limo making a turn. I think you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking.
Hmm.
That street where that happens is 5 minutes away from where I live.
Oh, really?
And interestingly, another interesting fact is there's a store that appears when that car makes a turn, and it's a jewelry store. And our company was so I direct films, and one of our part of the business is doing a lot of branding films for, businesses and all that. So that jewelry store is a place where we did work last year for a couple of weeks, and we produced a whole bunch of stuff for them. So it was interesting to see. I see that logo and I'm like, where have I seen that logo? Right? And it was pretty cool to see that, and being in Toronto and being that way from, like, 5 to 7 minutes away, it was really cool. I just thought I wanted to add that. It was kind of
Yeah.
a
I think
nice
it's
little
I think
story.
it's so funny when like I can imagine it's different when you're from like Canada or the States, and like obviously if you're from New York, like a bunch of films are shot there, but Iceland is another story. So I mean, we're just a super tiny country, and they filmed True Detective Night Country here in Iceland. And I
Yeah.
think it's very funny for Icelanders to watch a show that is supposedly, supposed to happen in Alaska, and you're like, you just can't believe it because as an Icelander, you will know each house in the frame, you will know each street, and you're gonna be like, I don't believe that. Like I know where this is,
And
which is
that's
quite.
it is kind of cool, but I don't know about you. For me, it it is cool, but it's not cool. And the reason it is, so when the film started, the where they shot the entire film, it's now known as Rogers Center, but it used to be called Skydome, and I always call it Skydome because that's just the way I grew up with that. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool, but I feel for me, if it kind of takes away the novelty from it, if that makes sense. Because you know
Mhm.
the place. If you
Yeah,
don't know where it is, it's kind of like, even if it's just like a street, a house, it's magical because you don't know where these people live, where they are, even though it may say it's New Jersey or Oklahoma or whatever. I think it is kind of like um a two-edged sword, sorry.
yeah,
That's nice, but
totally.
it's not nice. Anyways, going off topic here. Um, w- what when you said you went to the set to get, inspiration of the music, I don't want to talk about any of the scenes. I don't want to talk about any of the details or anything.
Mhm.
What was the feeling that you got from something that you saw? Let's say take a moment from what you see in the trailer, like,
Yeah.
anything that in the trailer that kind of brought you to that,
Hmm.
emotional feeling and to be able to produce the music that you did.
Yeah, exactly. It's like such a difference to work off a script and to see the visuals. Because for me as a film composer, it is amazing to work off script because it gives you a lot of freedom and you can go wherever you want to go. Sometimes you're lucky and like magically it's gonna fit into the film, and
Mm,
sometimes not. And that's just how it is. So I
yeah.
think like being able to like see a little bit of how it's visually gonna look and just look through the camera as Night is filming helps me to understand a little bit the aesthetics. Like all of that like really matters for when I start to decide on the sound world and the music. You know, what is the aesthetics that he's going for? What kind of cinematography are we talking about? How is he shooting this? Like, what is the vibe? How does everything look? It definitely influences, and it gives me some kind of an understanding of how I can start the music. So it was incredibly helpful. This is the first time I've ever done this. I've never been to a set before, and obviously it's also weird, to see like how they film things. You're like, oh, it's not real, it takes away this like beautiful
Yeah.
illusion you have about
Yeah.
film. But it was good. It was helpful for me because then as soon as I got back, I already had a little bit of more of an idea of what I was gonna do. But then again, it's also like always such a different process because when I was going through this film with Night and as we were starting out, because Josh Hartnett, I mean, he's kind of funny as the butcher. So this is a thriller. So like as I was like watching the scenes, I was like, damn, like this. I wasn't sure, like, is this a comedy? Is this a dark comedy? Like, where are we going? And what story is the music gonna tell? So it took us a few weeks just to kind of figure out what would be the role of the music in the storytelling. Going between these like kind of funny moments to actually like going to the underlying darkness and kind of, fucked up shit that is also happening in the story.
Right. And it's interesting you mentioned you can figure out what it was. Um, for me, and look, I'm a huge fan of M. Night. Like, from Sixth Sense up until Split, I've seen everything. I haven't seen Knock at the Cabin and Old yet, and then I saw Trap. For me, one of the things, the trailer was really well put together, and the concept is really, really cool, which I read M. Night got it from an article that he read about something like that happened in the 80s, not like a butcher, but some concert and things went wrong, and he just kind of took it from there and then turned it into something
Mhm.
of his own. I personally felt it was least favorite film of mine of his because I couldn't figure out what the tone was. Maybe I need to see it again because I just
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out, and I'm not trying to be critical, but there were some great moments in there, great scenes. Harnett was amazing. And the final scene was really, really strong and powerful. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Mhm.
But it's interesting you mentioned that. Maybe it's one of those films that needs to be seen again. But going back to what you said about being on the set, did M. Night ask you to come on the set, or was it like he gave you an option? What was that like? What was the reason?
Uh, I don't remember exactly. I think it's like when we were working on Knock at the Cabin. I think we talked about it would be fun to come to the set. And as I was like started the second project, it was just kind of we decided that it would be good just to come over uh, and it's also just obviously fun to be able to
See
get
the
a bit earlier into the process before you start a project like this.
Was there a difference for better or for worse being on the set versus not being on the set in terms of what you were able to produce at the end, the final score?
Uh, it's so hard to answer these kind of questions, I think, because when you're like doing music, it's so much of it is like a work of the subconscious. It's a work of
I
your
agree.
instinct and your gut, and it's so complicated. Like I don't even know how it works. It's like
I
these
I'm
things that
so I'm so glad you said that because it is all about that. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say because it's everything is different. It's just sometimes you don't even know why is what happening and how is it happening, but it's just happening, right?
yeah,
It's so
actually,
cool. But I'm glad that you feel that because you can't just label everything on one thing. It's just a feeling that you get that you can't explain.
exactly. Where does it even come from? We don't know. Some other multi-dimensions.
I find you're quite self-aware, which is awesome. Um, when did you see the film? Well, no, that's not the question. When you saw the film, what was your reaction as a moviegoer, as an audience member? Do you remember that feeling that you got, or when you were watching certain scenes,
And I still have not seen
the
the
final
film.
cut?
Yeah, I
Okay.
haven't seen the final cut because I couldn't make it to the premiere, and I am gonna see it tomorrow for the first time, which is obviously a little bit anxiety provoking. But it was like kind of funny because I never saw the entire film until quite late in the process. So when we started from the end. So it was a very like strange way of working the score, and I think partly like yeah, because sometimes like when you're working on a film, it's so good to start at the beginning and you're kind of like starting a story and then gradually you're expanding it and going deeper. So I had to kind of start at the end, when everything has happened and go backwards.
Oh
So it
wow.
took me it took me a little bit of like I guess longer time to figure it out. I guess because I started, as you can imagine, having seen the second half of the film, there's a lot of difference in the story and in the tempo.
Yeah, and I truly feel, well, for any kind of a horror film or a thriller film or a butcher film, for the lack of a better word, it's there's suspense and a lot of suspense sometimes built with no music and no sound effect, just like the roaring silence. But obviously, more than a lot of times it's with the music, and your music really, and this is one of the things that I've spoken to a lot of composers on this podcast, well-established ones, upcoming ones. And one thing that I really enjoyed with Trap in terms of the score, like many other films, which is not that many, some other films which are not that many, is that there were I can remember the score, but I can't remember it because it was so part of the film as a character that it pulls you in, but it's not like something that overpowers the characters, the story, and all that stuff. So I thought that was really, really cool with what you did with the score.
Thank you.
Um, how did your career in music started? What inspired you to become a composer?
Um, yeah, I have kind of a weird story because I never thought about being a composer like my entire, I guess, childhood and young adulthood. I was kind of on the more straighter line. I don't know where it came from, but my dad is a philosopher and my mom did like political science and was an editor of a magazine. And I saw them and I was like, damn, like, I don't want to be poor. Like, I need to figure my shit out. Like, I need to study something that, you know, I'm not going to be like totally screwed. So I went, did like physics in my, kind of high schools, like physics and maths. And I was thinking about going into that or medicine or something super practical. And I ended up because a bunch of my friends were going to law school and I'd never even thought about it. So I signed up for that, just simply being like 19 years old and like quite lost.
Mm.
I signed up for law school and I was there for 1.5 years or 2 years, almost have a bachelor degree in law. And I hated, yeah, with full respect to lawyers, and I have a lot of them around me, some of my best friends today. I like absolutely hated it a lot. I found it like profoundly boring. I should have like signed up for literature or philosophy or something that I was interested in. But somehow I went that route. And while I was studying law, I would come home from school every day and I started playing the piano again. So I hadn't played for a few years. I kind of dropped out of, I did like piano lessons. Was kind of like lazy, not that interested in it, dropped out. And I started playing again. And as I was playing, I was also writing music. And I started to become super interested in the process of that. And I started studying, I know it's very nerdy, but I started studying music theory by myself, just like a homeschooling myself. And I started like teaching myself how to write for string arrangements and how to write for choir. So it was like a full-on hobby that I would just spend my time instead of like opening the law school books. And like the first thing I did was that I wrote like a choir piece for like a senior citizen choir that my grandmother was a part of. So it's just like kind of like dabbling around in the kind of more like classical zone of music. And then my childhood friend, she's an actress and she was studying at the art academy. And she was like, there's a bunch of kids at the school and they are studying to be composers. I was like, what? Like, can you even study that? Is that even a school or a degree? And it sparked an interest. So I decided just to throw like a portfolio together with the stuff that I've been doing over this year. And like magically I got in with no background. I didn't know shit in music theory. I barely read any sheet music, but somehow I got into this bachelor program. And I thought I was just gonna stop and just like kind of check it out and then go back to law school or whatnot. And that did not happen. Like after the first year, I just felt that I was doing something that I was truly interested in and that I really loved. And I guess had always been, I guess it's just when something is a big part of you, when you can't escape it. And music had been a very big part of me since I was a small child. Like since I was 8, I would sit and go through records and listen to Beethoven and Mozart, like a really weird kid, really interested in classical music and all that. And I guess just finally in my early 20s, I kind of accepted that it was my fate uh, to do this. And I just allowed myself to take the jump and go for it. Obviously, my parents were very nervous about the decision and all that, but it somehow just, worked out to the point that I'm able to work as a musician today.
That's incredible. That's really, really cool. Um, who were the composers that you looked up to growing up?
Um, I was a big fan, like when I was like playing the piano, I was like a big fan. I was kind of in the early 20th century or late 19th. Like I loved like
Uh,
Debussy a lot. It was a big, big inspiration.
That's
And
amazing. What was
later
yeah,
I was super into like the Polish like minimalists like Penderecki and Gorecki and that stuff inspired me as well. Ligeti.
They say that even whether you're a director, writer, composer, whatever, editor, cinematographer, they say that watch the old stuff or listen to the old stuff because that's where the real um art and storytelling is. And even like a lot of musicians now, like music composers, with the likes of Hans Zimmer, John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, I mean, Alan Silvestri, they all have been inspired or maybe even sometimes borrowed from classical composers, right? And gave it a little spin of their own on it. So it's really good to hear that you're going in that same realm, which is awesome. You still there? Did I lose you?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
hi.
Okay. Um, what's next for you?
Right now, I'm working, which I love to do in between to work in my home country. So I am working on a mini series, which is about Iceland's first female president and the first female president in the world, Herdis Stefansdottir. So we had the first female president elected in the 80s, and I am working on that.
Amazing. It's an Iceland production? Like
Yeah, yeah.
God. What was her name?
Herdis. So my name is Herdis, it's almost
I
the
know
same
her
name. Herdis Finnbogadóttir,
first. Oh, she was a president, not prime minister.
president. We also had a female, I think I might not be telling the truth, but I think we
So,
had the first, or at least one of the earliest female prime minister as well.
because I know Indira Gandhi was the prime minister in the 80s, and she was, I'm just looking it up just to get the factual stuff right. She was prime minister from 1966 to 77, and then from 1980 until 1984. I don't know the first part. I knew the second part. Anyways, sorry, I love going on a tangent. But working with M. Night, what is it like?
M. Night is a super interesting director. He's a very musical director, which not all directors are. For some directors, the music is more of an afterthought or something you add, just like humans. Like some humans are like really into music and inspired by it, while others are not. But he really truly is. So for him, which is interesting, in the early stages, he will want to have a lot of conversations with the composer. And he brings the composer a lot into the storytelling and into the narrative. Like, as we were discussing early on, like, who is the butcher? What is his story? Like, what is his motive? What is his background? Kind of going a bit like deeper into the characters quite early on. And I think it's cool as a composer to be involved in that, not just getting like an almost final cut and you start like smudging some music to fix it up. So yeah, for him it's like very important to involve the music as a part of the storytelling.
Is he, I mean, I've seen his interviews. I've seen a lot of behind the scenes stuff in terms of his vision on the set. Well, from what you were there, you've only been there like, once for a little bit. How is he in terms of directing his actors and, for the lack of better word, controlling his team or leading his team, I should say? What
Yeah,
did you think of that?
I mean, I've never seen anybody direct before, so I don't really have the comparison of how it is, but it seemed, I mean, to me, it seemed very like confident and kind of easygoing. It was like it didn't feel stressful to be there and watch it. They were just like kind of running the ship smoothly.
That's nice here. What's have you seen all of his films?
No, no, not at all.
You haven't seen which movies have you seen
I've
specifically?
seen The Sixth Sense. I've
Okay,
seen Unbreakable.
okay, that's a good one
I've
too.
seen Split.
Okay, that's a good
And
one too. Which one, sorry?
Old, I've seen.
Okay.
Uh, I think I saw The Village like a long time ago.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Very underrated movie of his. Uh,
Yeah.
another great
And
one of his,
Signs, obviously
Signs.
Signs.
I was going to say
Yeah.
Signs.
Yeah, I
I
think those.
haven't seen. I wasn't really too crazy about Lady in the Water. I saw Servant the first season.
Yeah, I did
Uh,
see that too.
and then he did something else in between about the grandparents. I forget that. I haven't seen that either. It was some interesting concept.
I mean, he does a lot. It's a kind of a work to keep up. He's a very, very productive person.
Have you seen The Happening?
No, I have
Okay.
not.
I remember when it came out. I'm sorry, I'm just going on a tangent here. I remember when it came out, everybody thought, what the hell did he do? Like what did M. Night Shyamalan do? I loved it. I absolutely loved
Interesting.
it.
Yeah.
So all I will say is this, Happening came out, I would say, in the early 2000s. And then just around COVID or during COVID, another movie came out called Bird Box.
Oh
I don't know if
yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw it.
very similar to Happening.
Okay. Yeah.
Except
I mean,
except the blindfold, like that whole thing. But it was very similar in terms of the
okay.
feel. Yeah, I just felt like they took that idea and just moved it around a little bit and turned it into something else. But
Yeah.
I love The Happening. You should watch The Happening. I think it's one of his
Yeah.
best films. And I don't know why people don't like it, but
But
it
I
is what
think
it is.
that's what's so like interesting about M. Night is that whatever he does, like people have very strong reactions because a lot of films are like people are like, yeah, it was fine. But people are either like, this is the fucking worst piece of crap ever made, or they're like, I absolutely loved it. So I think it's always good as an artist when you can also get, kind of polarized opinions. That is
It
just
is.
not
It
the
is.
middle timer.
Because then you're not pleasing everybody, right? You're just
Yeah.
making a film that you want to make. Whether
Yeah.
people like it or not, that's up to them. But nevertheless, it has so much tension in that movie. Um, and it's just completely out of the box. But I urge you to see it. He yeah, he was really, really targeted with that movie. And I think that movie and Lady in the Water kind of put a stop to all of his films until he made a comeback and now he's self-financed, which is like crazy and amazing. I mean, kudos to him that he does that. That's awesome.
Hmm.
Uh, just kind of wrapping it up, who are some of the directors that you would love to work with?
Um, I always find it a little bit hard to like drop names, but I think like my what I'm really interested in as an artist is to be approached with filmmakers that are telling a story that I want to be a part of telling, something that I feel is important. And yeah, I hope that, one day I will work with um a beautiful artistic director that I can share a vision with. I would say like kind of the films that I like are get a little bit more in the maybe art house
Mm.
field.
Real stories.
Yeah. Or I mean, it can be sci-fi, but I also believe that like aliens are probably real and all that. So it doesn't have to be in a certain thing, but as long as I find the story like interesting and moving and
I
all
think
that.
the key word is what M. Night does so well is that, you look at, I don't know if you've ever seen Independence Day, which came out like 30 years ago almost. It's about
I
alien
have
and
seen it. I think I watched it for the first time just in COVID or something.
right. So when
Yeah,
it
I have
first
seen it.
came out, like I was in my early 20s. I loved it, right? I thought it was great. I loved all these different stories. But as you get older and older and you start realizing and then being in the films myself, like stories that I want to tell, I like to tell stories that are very, very tight and grounded, like with as less characters as possible, so you have more time to explore them. And that's what M. Night does so really, really well. It's like he just creates this world. Even with Trap, I may have my disagreements with it, but it's just this world that he creates that you feel like this is the world and that's it. like nothing else exists, which is so incredible talent to have. And I get it. So that's what you are into too. So that's awesome. Tell me about your if you don't mind sharing. You said your dad is a philosopher and your mom is a political activist. I would love to hear about that if you're
No,
comfortable.
yes, he studied like political science and
Political
what
science.
later. Yeah, I think like, sorry, what was the question?
What do they do? Like what does a philosopher do?
I mostly teach and work on writing and working on thesis and that kind of stuff. But I think, I think it was pretty cool because my dad would, from a young age, always, he would very much like teach me about the moment and being bored and the importance of boredom, which I think is a very valuable lesson for children,
Yes.
because I think, especially in modern times, we're being bombarded with information with our telephones and everything. And it's kind of the killer of creative thought and just thinking in general and just pondering and going inward. So I've kind of practiced that and taken it with me that whatever I'm doing, if I'm like waiting in a line at the bank or um, waiting for the bus or whatnot, just to be, just there, just to observe and just and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. Obviously, I open my phone sometimes and get sucked into doom scrolling, on social media. But I really appreciated that, uh, even though I hated him for it. He lived in the countryside, and I was there for like days on end, and he would be like, "Figure it out." And it ended up with me being a 9 or 10-year-old, and I started my own business, and I was walking between towns in the countryside, like selling ribbons to support cancer. I just like figured out ways to entertain myself and not be bored. And I taught myself how to like do the walking skis and whatever. So I think it's a beautiful experience, and I'm trying
I'm
to.
yeah. I'm so glad you said that because boredom is the beginning of creativity. And I actually try now. I mean, it was before it was more like a random thing, but now I try to like if I'm at the airport waiting for a flight, right? Like I'm gonna try, obviously not perfect, not to be on the phone, just so I can just look around and just observe people and just take it. As boring as that is, it just brings in some of it hits some of the subconscious thoughts and comes up with all
Yeah,
these ideas.
100%. I think we sometimes like forget just to be in the moment and experiencing life, and you never know like how it affects you. It's like the phones are just such a like, I mean, obviously we're all addicted to it, and it's a whole thing, but I think it can suck you into, I think that's why time is going by so fast for everybody, because we're just constantly getting information, like, and for what? What's the point?
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, maybe some cases, but not all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, right. But listen, this has been, is it Herdis that you pronounce your name?
Herdis.
Sorry?
Herdis.
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 Herdis. Herdis. I would love to, when is this series about the female prime minister coming out or president coming out?
It's coming in December.
I would love to chat with you again about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually a very, very inspiring and beautiful story.
What is it called? Does it have a title yet?
Vigdis. Just her name.
Spell,
Vigdis.
spell that for me.
Vigdis.
Vigtis.
Dis, like D like David.
Okay. Is this going to be on Netflix or is it going to be just for local, like domestic
Uh,
streaming channel?
I think it would probably start out premiering in Iceland, but I don't know. I think it's a lot with like Icelandic film projects that sometimes they get picked up and sometimes not. Just depends on.
And
Um,
the director of that is Baldwin. Is it Baldwin?
no, it's this group called Vestiport, which I have worked with before. Like really, really amazing collective of artists. So there's a couple of directors on the series.
Yeah, no, the reason I said that name is I'm on Variety right now from January 2021, and it says Iceland's Balvin Z turns to first female president in the world with Vigdís. I don't know if it's the same series or not. Probably not.
Oh, maybe he's producing, or I'm not sure, but he's definitely not directing it.
Okay, so maybe it is the one, four-part series, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's probably the one. So this, I mean, makes sense. It was announced back then and it's probably like gone through production and post-production now. So
yeah,
okay. Yeah, I would love to chat with you on that. Let's do that.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
we will stay in touch and maybe we can do a episode on that in December when it comes out.
Great, sounds good.